Welcome to the STRU podcast, your number one online hosting community, helping you achieve your goals through short-term rental investing. Now, here's your host, Richard Ferdig.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Richard, founder of Short Term Rental University and Airbnb Superhost. On today's podcast, I'm super excited to welcome Danny Rastine. He's the founder of Optimize My Airbnb. And Danny, what I'd love for you to do is introduce yourself and tell everybody where you are and what you're doing, and then let's turn to search engine optimization to help people get their Airbnb listings ranking better and more money in their pocket.
Yeah, will do. A brief history of myself is I worked for Airbnb from 2013 to 2016. I'm a CPA by trade, so I worked in the accounting department. I worked in the local operations department for a few months at the end there. And then I started an Airbnb property management company, which I still run today remotely. And then I started OptimizeMyAirbnb.com in mid-2016. And that's what I do now, pretty much full-time. That's what I focus on for sure. And I should say I'm here in Guatemala, Antigua, Guatemala. I'm here learning Spanish and how to dance salsa. And in order to help the Spanish part, I'm living with a local Guatemalan family. And they have a 5-year-old kid, and I think there's 7 people in the family. So there could be a bit of noise every now and then. I told them I have a very important call with Richard, but just so you know, if there's a few screams every now and then, there's not much you can do about a 5-year-old.
No, totally cool. And that sounds great. You know, I think you're the definition and personifying the digital nomad. So this is like the way I think people are going to be doing more things. And I think it's really awesome that you're doing it. Just by way of introduction, because I'm wearing a silly hat, I didn't realize that we were going to be doing this via video today. And I was skiing. I just moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Charles pulled me off the slopes and told me I had to do this podcast right now. And so I'm here, but I didn't have a chance to shower up or anything. So we're both doing our thing. We're living life. And that's sort of the opportunity as digital nomads and serial entrepreneurs. But without further ado, Danny, let's talk about how people are using your services and what they can do either on their own or with your help to improve their Airbnb listing. And before the call, you said that while you focus primarily on Airbnb, a lot of the same sort of techniques or methodologies apply to HomeAway, or I guess Flipkey may be out of business, Booking.com. But tell us what you're seeing, what people can do, and then walk us through a little bit your business model, what you do for people.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing I'll address is there's no secrets. So if some people out there say, I have this secret, if you pay me this amount of money, you get these secrets, enroll in this course to get these secrets. There's no secrets out there. All there is what I've done is I've spent the last 2 years working at Airbnb, being an Airbnb host, traveling on Airbnb as a guest, creating a short-term property management company. I've just spent the last 2 years thinking so much about Airbnb that most people with a regular 9-to-5 job or any other job who don't spend all their waking hours thinking about how to maximize everything, they probably don't get to this level of depth of knowledge, and just it basically comes from just thinking about it. So I put on my blog once a week. I put a new article, and so all my secrets will be there eventually. I also have a book, and all my secrets, again in quotes, are there. But there's so much. It's a broad question. There's so much you can do. From my specialty is the online aspect of it. So I tell people, think of Airbnb just like you would think of Google. At a really high level, whoever's website on Google gives the guest or the visitor the best experience, the higher they're going to rank. That's the same with Airbnb, with one big difference. Airbnb's listings make Airbnb the company money directly. Websites don't have to make Google the company money. So with that being said, things like cancellations are a huge no-no. Things like not responding to guests timely are a huge no-no. So I focus on the online aspect. The offline aspect is huge. The offline aspect is the reviews. Once the guest gets there, they're going to review you. But there's a million things. I can the biggest thing that a host can do right now is with photos, because photos is the number one. Photos are probably like 80% of whether a guest books or not. That's the first thing people see from P2. Airbnb calls it P2. P1 is the homepage. You type in Antigua, Guatemala, where I'm at. You press enter. P2 is that next page, which they've actually just switched it up, but normally it has 2 or 3 listings on the left side and then a map on the right side. They actually just switched it up. Have you seen this? The map is the same size, but there's 1 listing per row. They're testing that out.
I haven't seen that yet.
They're testing it out in some markets.
I haven't been searching for stays.
Yeah. They test a bunch of things out all the time. Sometimes they do away with it. Sometimes they don't. But either way, the search looks similar. You click on a listing, and so that's P2. P3 is the actual listing. So the photo is the first thing that a guest is going to see on P2, the search results page. On P3, that's the first thing they're going to click. I mean, 95% of hosts, the first thing they do is click in the photos. A lot of hosts, the top things wrong with photos is there's too many photos. Rarely are there too few photos. I suggest no fewer than 10. But if you have a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house without any outdoor space, you don't need 25 photos. You're gonna bore the guests. I call them future potential guests. You're gonna bore them. So especially with Snapchat, Instagram, Tinder, what else do we have? All these apps that people have. The human attention span has plummeted. So that first photo is good. Those first 5 photos are very important. You gotta just wow them with everything. And then don't have too many photos. A lot of hosts, believe it or not, have their best photos in the end. When I optimize a listing, every single host, I'll do major changes with photos, whether that's adding a caption. Oh, another thing that I do sometimes is if a host has a bunch of solid reviews, I'll actually screenshot a review and I'll put that into the listing. So because the reviews are all the way at the bottom of the listing. And I'll put that in like the 5th, 6th, 7th photo. So they're scrolling by, and then I'll also have the review will be responded to by the host. That shows extreme engagement. It's not really a listing thing. It's not a ranking factor. But if a host, I have a lot to say, so keep me on track if I'm going off track. But regarding reviews, I have a business Instagram account, and whenever I see something especially egregious, I do a video on it. And the other day, this happens so often, it's incredible. So a host doesn't respond to any reviews. So my recommendation to start off is I recommend a host respond to most reviews. You don't have to respond to every review. If someone says good place, you don't have to respond to that. But I recommend responding to most reviews, maybe 3 out of every 4, 3 out of every 5. A lot of hosts don't respond to reviews. The majority of hosts don't respond to reviews, but then they get that one negative review, and then they start thinking, oh, geez, I got to respond to it. I wonder if I can. They figure out that they can, and they respond to that negative review. So by doing that, all the host has done is called extra attention to that one negative review that they have. So I recommend, I think you should respond to the review, but you should also respond to the other reviews too. And also a big point, this is the video I did on my Instagram business page. This host had like 9 reviews or so. There's some noise. Can you guys hear that?
A little bit. They're having fun.
Bit? All right. They are having fun, yeah. So the
Instagram page.
So I did a review on this, a video on my Instagram stories, my business page. There's a host, has a good listing. He has like 9 5-star reviews. And then at the review all the way at the top, the review starts off good. It's a long review, and it starts off like, this was an amazing experience. I'm glad I chose here. And then halfway through the review, the guest mentions something mildly negative, like they had a little issue checking in. And the host responded to that, only responded to that negative point. And so future guests are going to read that. And if the host didn't respond, the guests are just, they're skimming for negative reviews. They would have skimmed the first line or two. It's a positive review, go to the next one, especially if it's long. They probably don't read every single one. So what this host did was he made every guest now go back and read that review, that negative review. So instead, what the host should do is, on these huge reviews, this is especially powerful, I tell my hosts, pick out one piece of important information that isn't well expressed in your listing. Like, you could have, let's say, a rooftop balcony. You probably have a photo of that, but just for example, or your central location. The guest comments on how central the location is. 1 block off the main street, so it's quiet, but you go 1 block down and you have all the restaurants, the bars, there's a park next door. So, and the review is long by the guests because they really like your stay. So I would pick out that one piece, respond to it. So now you're allowing, because also keep in mind on Airbnb, the reviews they're shortened if they're too long. So now when you respond to that review with that one piece, you're allowing the guest to skim your cliff notes of your listing. Oh, okay, it's super central location. That's what that guest said. Oh, it has parking, and there's parking's a big issue here. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. So let me just say for the people that are listening, everything that you've said, we entirely support and endorse, and we've created videos sort of suggesting the same things. We believe definitely in responding to reviews. We think it just shows engagement, and if you're a really good host, you are caring and you're concerned and you're engaged. And so the little act of responding is really important. I think photos are really important, like you've suggested. And we've suggested that people go ahead and do A/B testing with different thumbnails. Like, just because you think it's the best photo or shows your place best doesn't necessarily mean that the world at large likes that photo as well either. And so we spend a lot of time suggesting that people, just like a regular business, view this online presence as something that's always to be improved and always tested, and take new photos. So totally agree with all that. I guess my question now would be, we've talked about some of the best practices. You mentioned some things that are room for improvement is what we'll call them for hosts. But let's talk about the algorithms that are secret to Airbnb. We recognize that you don't know the secrets. I don't know the secrets. Unless you work at Airbnb, no one knows the secrets or the algorithm. But what are some egregious things that will put you in the penalty box? What are some things that Airbnb maybe has even expressed as, these are things you should just not do, so that if anybody listening to this has these flaws, these problems on their listing, they can quickly and easily correct them by the time this podcast is over, and hopefully start to see their business improve?
Yeah, there's a few things that for sure either put you in the penalty box or for sure would help you, kind of the same thing. Put you in the penalty box, obviously I'll lead off with an obvious one, cancellations. If you cancel on a guest, think about it from a business. That's why I try and get all my hosts. Turn your mind you're now an entrepreneur if you're an Airbnb host. So if you cancel on your guest, you're doing a few things. You're giving that guest a terrible experience. And if you give a guest a terrible experience their first time using Airbnb, likely they're not going to return. They're not as likely to return as someone who has a good experience. So now you're taking revenue from Airbnb on that time and on the future time, and that guest, if they had a good experience, will probably recommend to other guests. So by one cancellation, you're making Airbnb, the company, miss out on a ton of money. So also, you can't be a superhost for a year. A superhost does not give you any additional ranking factor, but if you're a superhost, you're ranking fine probably already. So do not at all cancel on your guest. Another thing that's less known is not putting enough words. There is a minimum amount of words, and not filling out every text box. So there's some property management PMS companies, property management software companies, or property management companies that manage your listing. They have software that integrates with Airbnb more or less, and they put all the text into one box and they just categorize in that box. And so I'll see this sometimes. So 2 boxes are filled out, the other 5 or 6 are not. You're telling Airbnb algorithm, Airbnb the company, hey, I'm not an engaged host. I don't think these boxes are important. I'm just going to fill out this box. That's something you're not doing yourself any favors by doing that. Also, get yourself verified. I think probably 2 out of 10 hosts listings I looked at, they're not verified. Getting yourself verified does give the guest more comfort. A lot of first-time guests on Airbnb every day gives the guest more comfort. Also, it tells Airbnb, the company, this is an engaged host, they're a real person. It does help you in your ranking.
And when you say get yourself verified, you mean like give them the ID and whatever verification they require so that you're a known entity to them.
Yeah, airbnb.com/verify.
Okay, and is that something that like I've been using Airbnb for years. I don't recall whether I did that or I didn't do that, but chances are on the onboarding, I've supplied all that and I am verified, right? So like the average person is verified.
The average person is verified. The majority of folks are verified. And I've even seen some really successful hosts who aren't verified for one reason or another. So none of this is a requirement if you have everything else. But I recommend verifying yourself.
Well, look, I mean, we're just trying to optimize, right? So this is for the people that are listening to this podcast are trying to improve their business. And if they haven't been verified, they should be verified. Let me ask you another question about penalty boxes. And to your point, the inverse is generally true. So I'm approaching it from a negative perspective because I want to remove pain and problems. At the same time, to your point, the glass is half full. It's an opportunity. So what about rejecting requests to stay at your house? Do you think Airbnb penalizes you if you reject too many guests?
Yes, I think that they do, definitely. If you deny too many guests, they do penalize you. That is one of the bigger pain points. Check-in, problem finding a housing, and cancellations. That's one of the big pain points for guests. So yeah, if you repeatedly deny guests, you're going to go down and search because Airbnb is going to give that guest to someone who's more likely to accept it. 1 or 2 denials every now and then, not an issue. But if you're denying, yeah, some red flags will be raised.
So one of the things that I do personally on my listings, and I recommend that people follow suit, is instead of me rejecting the guest, I try and get them to reject or look elsewhere. And so what I mean by that is if somebody has never stayed in an Airbnb and they have no reviews, I'll often ask a lot of questions, and then I'll continue to get more granular until I get a sense for whether I want to accept it or reject it. Again, I don't reject it, but what I'll point out is if they say that they're coming to town and they're having a bachelorette party or a 30th birthday party or something like that, I'll remind them, because they probably haven't read the listing, they're just looking at the photos, that we have a no event policy. And so I'll thank them for their interest and say that we're probably not a good fit and encourage them to look somewhere else. And so I don't actually reject them, but they start looking somewhere else. And I'm hopeful, although I don't have any proof from Airbnb or the algorithm, that just letting this reservation or this dialogue go back and forth, or even the reservation request, time out on its own with dialogue is different than being like reject. Because I probably accept, I don't know, I guess it depends on the property, but I would guess it's somewhere about 50% or less of my guests. And I don't reject the other 50%. It's just I'm very selective.
Okay, yeah. It's so I wanted to make a quick point because you said you have a strict no event policy, which a lot of hosts have. But for those hosts who don't have that policy and are looking for extra income, there's actually a couple websites that are the Airbnb for events. And so I recommend this to some people who want more events, especially in big cities. It's called Splacer.co. You could just type in Airbnb for events. So this is an option for hosts, any kind of vacation rental hosts who are okay with events. And these usually happen during the day. So it's an option for a lot of folks. But you don't have to. So that on the bottom of the listing, it says this host responds to 100% of inquiries within, I think it says within an hour, or it has within a few hours, within 24 hours. So that doesn't mean that you click accept, pre-approve, or deny. All that means is you've made some sort of an action, and that includes responding via a message within the first hour. So you don't actually have to pre-approve or decline. So I'd say you're
Right.
correct in doing that.
Yeah, and what I've since I have virtual assistants helping me with manage my calendar, I have 5 or 6 places, Danny, that are listed, and I, like you, try and automate as much as I possibly can, and travel. And like I said, I just got off the ski slope, so I have virtual assistants that help me manage my calendar and my bookings. And what I've trained them to do is, oftentimes where they get hung up is when there's a question that they've never seen before. I don't know, make it up. How far away are you from such and such? Or do you allow this? And they've never seen the question. They don't know how to respond. And so I have them respond instantly with, we're in receipt of your request. I'm getting the answer for you. We'll be back shortly. Or something like that. So like we respond and we have a 100% response rate. And they know that, we're on it and so on. So I think it's a better user experience. And hopefully it helps promote my SEO versus dinging me.
I totally agree. Have you hired these people by yourself and trained them by yourself, or do you use a company?
No, I've sourced my own virtual assistants and hired them and trained them on my own. I've tried autoresponder type software that helps automate the management of it, but I find it too limiting currently. There's exceptions to everything, and I just found when it was turned on, we were accepting people that I wouldn't have accepted. It didn't give me the flexibility to make human decisions, right? It was all like computer logic, and sometimes there's things in the communication that would lead me to a different response versus the computer. So I just hire people and train them myself.
Yeah, it's a good idea. And your comment about some of these autoresponders, they have a setting where if you don't respond within an hour, that time limit, or you can set it to 30 minutes, they'll send a similar message saying, hey, we got your message, we'll respond in a little bit. And that creates a good user experience. I don't know if it does anything for your search rank, but it creates a good user experience to know that, all right, I can expect an answer soon.
So what else do you see happening in terms of best practices, and when people, and we should talk a little bit about your service. Danny has 3 different levels of service where he will either give you suggestions on how to improve. Like the first one you called, what did you call it, Danny? Basic?
The startup host.
Startup. Okay. So walk us through what startup does and what that costs, and then walk us through the other 2, and then I'll ask you a question about those.
Sure. So on the website, optimizemyairbnb.com, I have many products, but the 3 products that are my main products that people come to me for are the 3 reports that help you with your online aspect of your listing. I have tips on how you can automate your listing and be a good offline host, but it's focused on how to create the best online listing you possibly can. And the 3 packages are Startup Host, Advanced Host, and Super Host. I update all of these reports on a monthly basis with the new information I have. I read a ton online about these things, and I'm fortunate enough to get a lot of my prior customers and people who just follow me who've never purchased anything. They'll ask me questions, and this will lead me to be like, oh, that's a good idea. So I update these reports monthly, but the Startup Host is a report full of everything. So it's not going to be specific to your listing. All the information won't be specific to you, but it has all my information. So the difference between my 3 packages comes down to how much time do you have as a host to spend ingesting the material, researching it, and applying it to your listing. So the Startup Host package takes about 8 hours to read the whole thing, research a bit, and apply to your listing. The Advanced Host is semi-customized. So with every Advanced Host, my eyes look at your listing, and I create a report semi-specific to your listing. So this one, I say, takes about 4 hours to read and ingest and apply the changes. You have to apply the changes on Startup Host and Advanced Host. On Superhost, the time requirement that you have is about 30 minutes, and I create all the changes on your listing. I do that myself, and I send you a report with everything is specific to your listing, and then I save. For example, I change all the text. I change the photos, reorder them, add captions. So I'll save all the photos, send them to you. I'll save all the original text, send it to you. So those are the three packages. The main difference is the time investment the host has. If the host has plenty of time on their hands and they want to really learn all this themselves, order the startup host, and then if you want to upgrade later, you can. But that's my recommendation.
Okay, and what sort of results do people see?
So I measure results on only the Superhost package. So I measure two types of results. I measure how much income they brought in 7 days after my optimization, and so that's less of a specific measurement because I can't attribute. I don't know how much of that I can attribute to what I did. But with that said, they earn about 700% of their average nightly rate. So, for example, if your average rate is $100 a night, you can expect to earn about $700 in booking revenue over the next 7 nights. Now, I will say there's a wide variable there, and about 20% of hosts don't see anything. So to be upfront, 80% do, 20% don't see anything. I never get asked for refunds though, because the listing looks a lot better, and the tips I have in there are really valuable. And then the other more accurate measurement, I take 7 days before my optimization, and I see how much revenue they earned, and then 7 days afterwards, I see how much revenue they earned, and this is it works out to about 48% more afterwards.
48%?
Or 1.48x, 1.5x
Right.
more afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And I mean, it's a little bit challenging because there's seasonality, right? So like if there's no bookings, like there's periods in some of my properties where I don't get bookings for days, weeks, maybe even months, just because like people aren't searching. You know, I'm here in Jackson Hole, come mud season, which is April 1st when the mountain's closed. I imagine that this listing would do absolutely nothing the 7 days before or the 7 days after. Your optimization. I could be wrong, but I want to set people's expectations that there's variability, there's cyclicality, there's seasonality.
How many platforms do you list on?
I only list on 2. And in most of my properties, I'm on 2. In some of my properties, I'm on 1 because I'm busy enough. And to be perfectly honest, I spend a lot of my time and energy now trying to encourage other people to get started and to optimize and improve. And so the YouTube channel and Short-Term Rental University and so on is where I spend a lot of my time and energy, as opposed to maximizing my individual properties. I think we're doing pretty well.
I'd like to dispel a rumor, and the rumor is this: you'll see on property management sites, we list your site on the top 27 platforms. So this is incorrect. It does not help you. If you're a good host, depending on your location, you really only need 1 platform. And that's for a few. So what you just said, you spend your time on something else. So if these property management companies list on 27 of the top platforms, well, what do you think your listing is going to look like on 27 of platforms? It's not going to be a good looking listing. So my recommendation is, why not have a great listing and know that platform, 1 platform? And I obviously recommend Airbnb. There are exceptions. Some folks do need 2 or sometimes 3, never more than 3. But I suggest if you're on 2 or 3, then make Airbnb or make one of them your main platform. Someone can book for the next 6 months. And the average booking is typically 30 days out. So then I recommend on that second and possibly third platform, only allow folks to book within 30 days, where you're less and less likely to get a booking. And what that does is it helps you fill in gaps within 30 days or whatever that average is. Some folks are even at 14-day averages. But also it concentrates your reviews on a platform, and reviews are a huge ranking factor.
I think that's great advice. And me personally, I prefer the Airbnb experience. I like the community. I like the mutual reviews. Mm-hmm. It's just a much better platform in my own opinion versus HomeAway. That said, I do have a couple of properties that are in traditional vacation places, and for whatever reason, I get, I don't know, maybe 20% of my bookings through Airbnb and 80% via HomeAway or VRBO. And I think that's just because that's the nature of like the location. People have been renting via VRBO for, the last 10 years, and they're not about to switch their habit to like Airbnb. So that's why I have two locations, but in the locations where I only have one, it's only Airbnb. And I like the concept that you just put forward, which is to create a second one that only allows 30 days, and shorter, because that would fill in those gaps. I've resisted listing it on a second one because there's just not that much availability, and I don't want the hassle, and I'd rather focus on like what's working. But I do, if I could book one more night or 3 more nights a month, that's real money.
Yeah, just as long as that 1 extra night or 3 extra nights a month doesn't take away from your initial listing, because now you're devoting less time to keeping that listing up to date.
Yeah, and also the fees, right? So like VRBO, there could be an annual fee. But let's talk about something that I think is really popular right now. For those of you listening to this YouTube, for those of you listening to this podcast, you may be unaware of our YouTube channel, you may be unaware of our Facebook group, but we have, 6,000 subscribers on YouTube channel. We have 6,000 plus members in our Facebook group. And one of the things that comes up consistently, and I would say it's almost like every single month somebody posts it, is this whole concept of gaming SEO via everybody wish listing one another. I personally have never wish listed or asked anybody to wish list my property. I literally only wish list places that I would like to stay, and I don't want somebody wish listing my property if they're not intending to stay. That said, it's a big thing. We see it all the time, and there's these groups, and hundreds of people are wish listing and a lot of time and energy. So, Danny, from your expertise in SEO on Airbnb, does wish listing move the needle, and if so, how?
Yeah. That's a great point. The reason why you're hearing more of this is because Airbnb barely ever says specifically this affects your ranking, this does not affect your ranking. Wish lists is one of those things that they have said affects positively your ranking. And there was just an article, I think about a month ago, in Forbes that also brought this up. That Airbnb said wish list saves do increase your ranking. So a lot of people probably read that as it's Forbes. So that's where all this is coming from. But with that said, wish lists do increase your search rank. And so if you can get your friends and family, I recommend my host, if they can get their friends and family to wish list their property, it does have a positive effect. I'm not sure if 3 saves have a positive effect or you need 300. I don't know what aspect that is, but the more the merrier for sure.
Okay, and now one thing that I want to just sort of say is while I agree with, it makes sense that wish listing would drive up sort of like your visibility, right? Like if you're in high demand, Airbnb would like to put you forward. But here's a cautionary tale that I want to talk about because I also run other businesses outside of this, and we talked about Google before. Once something gets abused, Airbnb and Google and Facebook and all these companies are not dummies, right? Like they are way smarter than we are, and they have big data. Once they start to detect that something goes from like a helpful indicator to a hurtful indicator, that it's like being gamified and it's no longer reliable, they can very quickly and easily turn it off. And so if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and Google like Google Panda update, Google Penguin update. A lot of small businesses that were taking shortcuts and sort of saying, I'm going to create content with keywords and stuff keywords and so on, found themselves going from the first page to like no page or last page. And they were literally run out of business. So it's a double-edged sword. And personally, my belief is I'm doing this for the long run. I own real estate. I've got 30-year, well, I personally use 15-year mortgages, but 15 years is a long time. I'm reliant on my guests and the income associated with being a host to make these monthly payments. And so I personally don't want to participate in anything that's going to be short-term great for a month, 3 months, 1 year, 3 years, but then has the possibility of hurting me for the last 12 years. So if people wish list me naturally, terrific. If my sister wish lists me, okay, cool. But the concept of going on a Facebook group and asking 6,000 total strangers from all over the world, and Airbnb seeing that I went from having like 4 wish lists to 474 overnight, I have a feeling that at some point Airbnb will say, we don't like that practice.
Yeah, there's even, first of all, I'm not sure how effective that practice is of posting your listing on a group and then asking for people to wish list it. I don't see a lot of people going out of their way to save your random wish list. A lot of the times these people posting this, it's their first post on the group. A lot of these groups have said, hey, don't post that anymore. So I'm not even sure how effective that is, but I know of at least one Facebook group which is dedicated only to this practice that you just brought up, wish listing. But another good point. So I will. They have said that wish lists do increase your rank, but at the same time, it almost seems like to me the folks that are running a bad folks that know what they're doing and are running a good Airbnb typically don't need a extra review or extra wish list saves. It's typically the folks who don't really know what they're doing, who are looking for kind of like cheating, quick fixes to do it.
Right.
And those are naturally not the good hosts anyways. So it is kind of a double-edged sword. It does help, but focus on being a good host for sure. I will say one other thing about these quick fixes. I get all the time people say, hey, I'll pay you. Can you leave me a review? And it's not a good idea. Reviews obviously do definitely help your search rank more than anything else, but it's very easy for Airbnb to figure out a fake review. If your listing is $200 a night and you lower it to $45 for a fake review, so you can avoid those fees, that's a pretty big indicator. You mentioned big data before. They can figure out fake reviews. If you do one fake review, probably not going to matter, but I've heard cases where it does. Again, focus on making a good listing, optimizing your guests' experience, both offline offline and online, rather than paying someone to leave you one fake review.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's really important. It's like everything else, right? Like, if you actually are doing a good job or creating good content or putting out a good Airbnb listing and you're being a good host, that will rise to the top. Airbnb and Google and Facebook and all these other companies that have access to all this big data, that's what they're spending time and energy on, is like, who's doing a good job? And so I think that the service that you provide, if people can't do it themselves, or you mentioned earlier that you write the reviews, a lot of people aren't natural writers and they're not marketing type writers or they're not travel type writers. And so I talk a lot about, painting the dream and sell the dream. Like, what's somebody going to come and do in your place? And why did you choose to buy this place or rent this place? And it's natural to me and probably to you, but not to everyone. Somebody could be a great host and not be a great marketer. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, having somebody help you in a legitimate way to improve your listing is probably a sound practice. But paying somebody to give you a fake review and to wish list you and to do all this stuff, that's just scammy. And I don't think that works in the long run.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So let's turn to things that you see. We keep talking about big data. What sense do you have about where we are in the Airbnb cycle? Are we seeing more demand from guests, or are we seeing more hosts coming online? There's an equilibrium there, right? People are very worried in my community about too much competition in their neighborhood and driving prices down. I have my own take on it, but I'd love to hear your opinion. Where are we in the life cycle of Airbnb, and where's it going?
Yeah, I think nowadays there's more and more hosts signing up. It does seem like the amount of hosts outpaces the amount of guests right now. There's a lot of hosts signing up. But with that said, I also think there's a trend bigger and bigger trend to being more location independent. For example, big offices. These are being now looked at like actually they're inefficient. You don't need to work at a big office. And I myself have been doing this for 3 years, working from home or working wherever I am. But I've been starting to hear my friends who work at traditional corporate jobs. I have an accounting friend who works at Salesforce. She works at home 2 days a week now. And I've been hearing this so much, this trend. So if you don't need to work at an office anymore, then you don't need to live in a big city anymore. If you don't need to live in a big city anymore, then cities like New York and San Francisco, they're going to relax their short-term rental regulations. So that's going to create more hosts. But also what it's going to do is it's going to allow folks to travel a bit more. They don't have to, if they don't have to be in office, they don't have to live in the city. They don't have to live in the city to do their job. So they can. Why do they have to do that one 2 week vacation every year? Why can't they go and do a 3 month vacation, but work while they're somewhere else? So I think this is a trend for the next 10, 20 years. But I've been hearing some really traditional corporate jobs, lawyers, working from home 1 or 2 days a week, and that's surprised me. But I think that trend is gonna increase.
I think you're entirely right. I think, and that's sort of my forecast of the world. I think the sharing economy is here. People share, co-working space at like WeWork. People share their homes via Airbnb. People share their cars via Uber. So this sort of sharing is here to stay. I think we're seeing a lot of people list their homes for rent, but I'm not sure that that's sustainable. In other words, I think there's a lot of people that try and get rich quick and jump on the next opportunity. And then they find out like, oh, wow, the guests, they've had a decent amount of communication. They left the place kind of dirty. I don't really like to clean. This is more work than I thought. And I think there's a lot of people that don't know how to price. They don't price their time properly. And so it's a grind if you don't do it well and you don't charge properly. And I bet there's a lot of turnover. So while we may see a lot of listings, I don't particularly feel the competition. I've been looking at my listings year over year, and with the exception of Colorado, that's had a terrible snow year. And so people are booking closer and closer to their travel dates. They're looking at the snow forecast. There's not great skiing in Colorado in the winter of 2018, so they're not booking. But that's not because there's increased competition. That's because there's a weather event, and unfortunately, my listing is down. But the rest of my listings are all up year over year. So even with this increased listing competition and more people coming to the platform, it seems like the people that are doing a good job and that really care and are engaged and are providing good experiences and reviews and doing all the best practices, we're doing better. It's like there's more demand for our homes than there is supply of our high quality homes.
That's good to hear, because I think part of it might be the business that I'm in. You're not going to probably come to me if you're maxed out every month. The people who come to me aren't getting any guests. So that could be a filter that I have put on myself based on the type of hosts that come to me. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, and what I've told my listeners or people that watch me on YouTube is I've never seen a location or a property type where this doesn't work. So people worry about I'm in a walk-up or I'm in a suburban area or there's nobody coming to this area. I think if you market it properly and use, perhaps your services or your best practices from your book or whatever, that this is here to stay, right? Like this isn't going away. And so I think that there's better investment areas and worse investment areas, but I've yet to see an area where it's like, nope, Airbnb and VRBO do not work there. So I think that the people that are hiring you are probably are having difficulty in the marketing component. And there's a real art to the marketing. There's a real art to the photos. There's a real art to telling people what you can do in the space, right? That's why people that write travel blogs do it better than we do. they're experts at that. And so I think there's a time and a place, and you're probably helping a lot of people that are suffering. And I think we could all improve, by the way, right? Like my listing could be better than it is currently. There's always room for improvement. But I just think that we have to separate sort of the business component from the marketing component of it. And I think that every place that I've seen works.
One comment on your related to this. So I have a strategy for these listeners and for people who have plenty of guests. You cannot have enough guests. What I do is I'll send so I do use an automated messaging system, and at the end of the reservation, I'll send to every guest who had a good experience, which is 99% of guests. I'll send them a message that basically gives them a friends and family discount. So I say, hey, if you or your friends are coming to town, I not only have this listing, but I have these couple other listings. Reach out to me, and I can give you. You can do anything. If you don't book midweek that well, you just give them a discount for midweek. Or if your average stay is 3 days, say here's a discount if you stay 5 days. Or here's a discount for these 6 months, whatever. But some sort of a friends and family discount, then you open up your net to not only them, but all their friends and families. And that brings in additional guests in the future. It could be, by the way, it's not like tomorrow you get an inquiry. Usually it's 6, 7, a year later, but it does come back.
No, that's a great tip, right? Like the people that are happy at your place are going to be your biggest advocates and most likely to share the information. So if you give them a reason to share the information, then they'll likely rebook.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, look, I think this has been super helpful. Again, for people that either know they're not good at doing this and that their listing needs help, we were doing free reviews for a period of time on our YouTube channel. So there's probably 10 or, I don't know, 20 reviews that we've done. I think Charles has created a playlist on our YouTube channel, which is Short-Term Rental University. So you can see the kind of things that we've done when we optimize listing reviews. But for people that need help and that YouTube channel isn't enough and know they want some help, Danny is the expert in this area. He's got a few different packages that he walked us through. So depending on your level of involvement and your resources, reach out to him. I'm a big fan. I believe this wholeheartedly. I do this myself with all my businesses. It takes money to make money, right? So don't think you're saving yourself $100 by not hiring Danny. You might save $100 and cost yourself $10,000 this year. If you need help, then you need to hire somebody to do it for you. We stopped doing the reviews because it was very, very time intensive and it was too focused for me one-on-one. I'm trying to teach as many people as possible the tips that I know work really well. For those of us that want to get even more granular, we've created paid memberships at STR University. We have a bachelor's track, which is for people that are smaller or newer or just getting started, maybe 1 or 2 listings. And then we've created a master's track where we have people that are doing this professionally or as a business. They want more hands-on involvement. But even in both of those areas, we don't do very much on the individual one-on-one listings because it's just very time-consuming and laborious. And we're really happy to have Danny here as an expert who does do this kind of stuff. And if you need help, reach out to him.
Yeah, and one other thing, I wrote a book published in January last month called Optimize Your Airbnb. And it's a book of strategies for the intermediate and the advanced Airbnb hosts. And obviously it's at a much smaller price point than that $50 price point. You're just going to have to read and apply the concepts yourself. But that's on the website for that is optimizeyoureirbnb.com, the book website.
Cool. All right. Well, listen, Danny, I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I think this is really helpful. I think that people that need help, they now have a resource. So I'm glad that you were able to join us. Is there anything in the last minute here or so that we didn't cover that you'd like to cover, or any thoughts or tips that you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, there's a ton, but this is a big one. Present the information to your guest only when the guest needs that information. And so to put more substance around that, if you have a bunch of house rules, so for example, if you're a host and in your house rules you have checkout information, you are not following this rule. the guest doesn't need to know this information until checkout. So in your listing, the only text should be in the listing should be text that the guest needs to know before listing. What's going to get them excited about booking your place? If there's trash pickup every Tuesday at 3 a.m. and it wakes you up every week, then this is something, they need to know beforehand, because that's about setting expectations. But the overarching, only send your guest information, provide your guest information at the time they need information. So one more example is, for me, 4 days before when a guest books, I say, hey, 3 days before check-in, I'll send you specific check-in info. And I have that in a guidebook that I create. And I'll send it to them actually 4 days before, because I found that about just over 3 days, they'll start emailing and say, hey, I realize I don't have the address or the check-in info, the lock code. So I'll send it to them 4 days before, saying, hey, here is your check-in info. And then checkout info I'll send 18 hours before checkout, usually 5 p.m. Checkout's at 11 a.m. the next day.
Cool. I think that makes perfect sense, right? Like you don't want to give them information that causes them to pause or reconsider or get distracted. The point of the listing is to set their expectations and get them excited to convert. I personally will also use that time to weed out bad guests for me. And I'm at a point in my business where I can take the variability, I can take the vacancy, and so I would rather miss bad guests than have a bad experience for both of us. And so in my listing, even though it may be counter to what you would suggest or others, but I will say, no events or no parties or no additional guests or whatever it is that is important to me, so that I'm sort of distilling down and attracting the kind of people that I want to attract, that I know have a good experience, that are going to be good neighbors to my neighbors in my community. And I'm sure it's cost me some business, but I'm sure it's also saved me some really bad headaches. And in order to do this sustainably and repeatably for, decades, I need to avoid those big problems, right? Like the people that are going to come and tear up my place and party or cause disruption to my neighbors, they're going to derail my entire business. And so I take one extra step in all of my listings and tell you, this might be a good fit if you fit into these categories, or this might be a bad fit if you're looking to do this, that, or the other. Counterintuitive, but it works really well. We self-select.
Yeah, definitely.
And by the way, I would rather those bad guests book my competition, blow them up and their business up, and then I stay, free and clear.
Yeah, I would rather deny 5 guests. 4 of them would be good and 1 of them would be bad, rather than accept 5 and get that bad guest, because one bad guest, like you said, could be a really bad guest. But something else came to mind about, it came to mind earlier when you were talking. A trick that I do sometimes in my listings is at the very end of the listing, I'll say, hey, in your subject or in your text, in your message, give me a code word. The code word I use is banana pancakes, just so I know you read the listing, because, I have important stuff in there. And so when guests send me messages more often than not and don't have that word in there, I just reply to them and say, hey, I just find that guests fit in better. It's a better experience when they read the whole listing. So please go ahead and do that, and then send me back a request. And usually they get the point. Those that don't get the point, I don't want.
No, exactly. And I think that that's a common mistake that new entrants to Airbnb and hosting, they think that what they're trying to do is maximize occupancy, and they view occupancy as sort of like the success barometer. And my success measurement is profitability, and repeated profitability. So missing those bad apples, and they are out there. There are people that'll say we're a family of 4 and they're 14 people, or they will say that we're coming to have a nice little dinner party and it's a rave. They know how to massage their message too. And you just need to be careful for that. Again, if you want to do events, and I have a property that does a lot of commercial events. We do photo shoots. We've had NBC filming Law and Order in there. And so there's nothing wrong with that. But again, we have insurance, we have guidelines, we price differently. If you do those events, you have to get paid for them. There's a lot more risk and liability and wear and tear. I recommend at least 2 times, but on some of these things, it's 5 times. You have to know what the budget is. Anyway, I think that that's really great that you pointed that out, Danny, and I really appreciate your time. If anybody wants more information or to hire Danny, you'll find him at, go ahead and repeat the URL.
The website is Optimize My Airbnb. The book website is Optimize Your Airbnb. Both are .com.
Cool. And I really appreciate you being there for our listeners, because we get requests all the time for people that want our help with their reviews, and we just don't have enough time to do it and do all the other stuff. So here's a resource for everybody who's asking. Danny, really appreciate your time. Good luck with the book. Good luck with the salsa dancing in Guatemala, and good luck with the Spanish. And muchas gracias por todo, mi amigo.
De nada. Thanks for having me. I hope I provided some. I hope I've brought a lot of value to your listeners.
I think you have, and I think anybody who's spending time and energy to help other people and help other people become self-reliant and entrepreneurial and less dependent on a W-2 job or so on, I think is the wave of the future. And so really appreciate your time and effort in that regard as well.
So that does it for another episode of the STRU podcast. As always, all links mentioned are in the show notes below. And if you found this show helpful, please leave a review on iTunes. If you're serious about short-term rental investing, be sure to check out str.university. Till next time.